speakers and do not reflect those of this station, its management, administration, and the Board of Trustees of City College of San Francisco. This is George Custer from KCSF's Voices of the Community. Welcome to our listeners around the country and around the world. Voices of the Community brings you critical issues in the San Francisco area. We introduce the voices who are working on solutions that follow community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. I would appreciate your feedback and comments on what you like about the show, what you would like to hear more about, or less about. So please go to Mixcloud and search for Voices of the Community and comment in the comment section. Welcome to today's show, which is part one of a four-part series focused on the accreditation of City College of San Francisco. City College of San Francisco's accreditation crisis began in 2012. Over the past 4 years, multiple issues and stories have been covered by the media. This four-part series attempts to provide listeners with 12 different interviews and points of view from the various voices of City College of San Francisco. The interviews were conducted from October 2015 to March 2016. The interviews in the four-part series have been edited to fit into our show format. I will be posting the unedited full interviews on my website, georgecoster.com, and mixcloud.com, along with each of the four parts of the series. I have reached out several times to the Accreditation Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, also known as ACCJC, and their president, Barbara Bino's office, to provide an opportunity to hear their point of view. President Bino's office has declined my request for an interview. Instead, the ACCJC staff has referred me to their website of press releases and an FAQ. In today's show, our voices of the community are Kristin Charles, the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Development, Accreditation, and the Liaison Officer at City College of San Francisco, and Special Trustee Guy Lease for City College of San Francisco, along with Karen Saginor, Department Chair of Library and Learning Resources at City College of San Francisco. Let's now turn to our interview with Kristin Charles and Guy Lease from the Chancellor's Office of City College to provide their insight into the accreditation process and status as of fall of 2015.
This is George Custer from KCSF's Voices of the Community. I'm here today with Kristin Charles, the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Development, Accreditation, and the Liaison Officer, along with Special Trustee Guy Lease for the City College of San Francisco, discussing the ongoing process of City College of San Francisco's accreditation. So, Kristin and Guy, welcome to Voices of the Community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Even with all the news coverage around CCSF and its accreditation and being open, there still seems to be some confusion in the marketplace as to what the status is of CCSF and its accreditation and where it is with regards to addressing all the issues that were started, what appears to be in 2012. Kristin, can I turn to you first and just have you provide an overview for the audience?
We are accredited by the ACCJC, and we are in a current process called restoration. In 2012, we were placed on show cause status. Then a year later, the ACCJC decided that they felt we had not made enough progress at that point in time and voted to terminate our accreditation. That termination, however, never took place because in the interim, we had appealed that decision, and then there was also, which we were not successful in that appeal, but then immediately on the heels of that, a new policy was put into place by the commission around restoration. And this was brand new, as I stated. This was for institutions who had been placed on show cause and had not been successful in their appeal, as we were not. Again, because it was new, we're like the pioneers of the restoration process. So that went into effect. It was a year ago in the summer. And last fall, in fall 2014, in order to be eligible for restoration, for the restoration process, we actually had to develop an entire institutional self-evaluation, very similar, in fact, virtually identical to what one would normally submit, what used to be every 6 years and now will be every 7 years for the normal accreditation cycle. And along with that, we had a site visit from a team that was put together by the ACCJC. Again, that's a normal part of the accreditation process. You would have an institutional self-evaluation and a site team visit. During that visit and also in based on our institutional self-evaluation, the commission later determined that we were eligible for restoration status and granted us that status in January of 2014. Effectively, under restoration, we have 2 years to fully meet all of the accreditation standards. That is a higher requirement than one would normally face. Colleges in the region are required to substantially meet the accreditation standards in order to not be placed on sanction. And in our case, we have to fully meet those standards in order to have our accreditation reaffirmed. But we are accredited. This would simply be to reaffirm our accreditation.
And where would you say CCSF is now within that process?
So right now we are in the process of developing another self-evaluation, which is an additional requirement that we submit that next fall. That would be fall of 2016. Again, we'll have another site visit. And then in January 2017, the commission will meet and they will review again our self-evaluation and the results of that site visit and make a determination of whether or not to reaffirm our accreditation.
You've hit milestones along the way, as I recall. Would you like to share what those milestones are?
Sure. There's a number of areas. I guess one of the key areas was in terms of documenting our student learning outcomes. I strongly believe this is something that faculty do by second nature, but we had not had a centralized way to document the expected student learning outcomes for each class or program, and then to really analyze those outcomes again in a more visible, centralized manner. And we have an online system now. We actually had developed our own online system, which was a great powerhouse, but not something we could really sustain long term. It was very time intensive, and so we now have a system called CurricuNet in place, which allows faculty to document the extent to which their students are meeting those achieving those student learning outcomes. For accreditation, we have to show continuous quality improvement. In terms of student learning outcomes, we need to document what they are. We need to show whether or not students are meeting those outcomes, and where it's clear that students are falling short of meeting those outcomes, we have to show what we are doing to make improvements to ensure that they can meet those outcomes. So instructional improvements, but it's not just in the realm of instruction, it's also in the realm of student services as well.
How do you feel it's going at this point?
I think it's going tremendously well. It's a huge workload on our faculty, but they have just risen to the occasion and have taken this on. We've an outstanding team of student learning outcomes coordinators who are leading this effort. We're actually now at the point of looking at disaggregated data. We're actually we'll be able to sort of slice the data in different ways. We can look at students by race and ethnicity. We can look at day versus evening students. We can break out all sorts of information about those students so that we can see if there are particular groups of students who aren't achieving at the level we would hope they would, and so we can target interventions more effectively. This is something that there's actually a new set of accreditation standards. We call them the 2014 accreditation standards that all colleges must now meet. This disaggregated data is a new dimension of that, and we're really ahead of the curve, which is wonderful. Again, it's challenging, it's a lot of work, and I just, feel tremendous gratitude toward everyone who's working so hard on making this happen. But our research office has come up with a way to disaggregate that data, and we're working to really make that as accessible as possible for faculty so that they can do those deeper looks at what's happening in their classrooms.
I read that about 50% of the funds that come to CCSF come from the state based on a student actually registering the state. So through this entire accreditation process, I think at the height of, 2012, the registered student body was something like 80,000?
I think yes. Around that number, maybe perhaps a little higher than that.
So then as the school's gone through this entire accreditation and all of the issues that have come and gone or that you're addressing, what's been the actual impact on the school itself, on the number of registered students? I mean, I know that you did a major push last year to try to get the message out that the school wasn't closed, we're still accredited, but obviously it's had some impact. What kind of impact has it had on the school?
I believe we're now around 74,000 students, and I'm afraid that the number of
wanted to-
FTES, full-time equivalent students, that number has just skipped my mind, but by which we've dropped. Guy, do you?
Yeah, we're down to about, 23,600 that we ended up in 2014-15 with, down from, depending on how far you want to go back, but if you go back, say, 6 or 7 years, we were up around 32,000. So we've seen about a 25% drop in our full-time equivalent students, which is the basis upon which the state pays us.
In an article, it mentioned something that the impact was something like $5 million to the school. Is that a range?
It's quite a bit
far
higher.
That's kind of what I thought. That's
Yeah,
why
we get just under $5,000 per full-time equivalent student, so and we're down about 8,000. So if you multiply those out, it comes out real close to $40 million a year
Right.
that we're down. And trying to adjust and align our budget to a much smaller revenue stream is one of the great challenges. At the same time, trying to increase the enrollment and sort of get our students back, if you will, so that we don't have to cut so deeply into the future. So bringing up enrollment at the time we're trying to align our schedule to the number of students we have now is the real challenge.
has it impacted faculty, the number of classes that you can have? I mean, $40 million plus is a lot of money, especially on an annual basis.
Well, yeah, if you have a schedule that's built around an anticipated enrollment of 90,000 students, and you only have about 74,000 students, clearly you have classes that the enrollments are very low in, or they're so low we have to cancel the classes. And if we can consolidate some of those where we offer multiple sections of the same course, we can bring down our expenses and still provide the access. You know, that's our greatest challenge in this, is how do we maintain access, maintain the classes students need, and yet, you know, manage to eliminate some of those classes so that we can align our schedule to the number of students we have.
Most wonderful parts about community college, especially CCSF, it's been a community asset for decades, and it provides access to, for example, the English as a Second Language program still had one of the few remaining programs in the state that was providing English as a Second Language for free for several thousand community members who were in taking classes, and that in turn was helping people change their lives. So has the cut in enrollment and the accreditation crisis really impacted programs like that where people from the community have access to that type of service?
Well, it hasn't yet. You know, we've canceled a few classes because of low enrollment, but we're looking at how do we do this over the next 2 or 3 years to try to align that schedule with our number of students. So while some of the non-credit classes you're describing are probably not going to have a major impact, because that's not where we've seen a drop in students. We're all about pathways. These pathways sometimes are towards citizenship, which is what English as a Second Language clearly is working towards, along with career opportunities for people who need stronger English skills to pursue their career. So that's one type of pathway. But the other pathways we're looking at are pathways to transfer to four-year universities. We're looking for pathways into careers, that we want to maintain as many of those pathways as we can so that we can meet our students' needs. Like I say, it's a great challenge for our faculty and staff to figure out where we can reduce our schedule without impacting those pathways, without impacting access, and still providing services to the community we need. Mm-hmm. Of course, our hope is that our marketing and outreach efforts will begin to offset some of that drop.
And so I want to turn for a second to Guy with regards to special trustee with extraordinary powers. When people read that, what does that mean? If you can kind of walk the audience through why and what would be really helpful.
Well, for a period of about 1.5 years, what that meant was that the Board of Trustees was actually suspended and set aside. So the special trustee, those extraordinary powers, was for an individual to perform the role of a Board of Trustees. An immense amount of responsibility. My predecessor, Dr. Robert Agrella, was in that role for most of that time and led the college through the whole restoration self-evaluation process and beginning to lay out the steps necessary to try to ensure that we could meet accreditation standards and be successful in the attempt to reaffirm our accreditation. So that was the big role. I arrived in February of this year at a time when we were working very hard towards a transition of the board back into power. While I had some extraordinary powers for a short period of time, most of what we were doing was working on training the board to take over their full set of powers on July 1 of 2015, which occurred. It occurred as a result of the board participation in an extensive training program to prepare them for this responsibility and giving them a certain amount of responsibility on a month-by-month basis as it increased until they were fully in power.
So is the board fully empowered at this point, or they're still going through the process of...
No, they're fully empowered. My role now is termed a stay and rescind power, which means I would have the ability to put a stay on any decision they made that I believe would not be in the best interest of the college, or to rescind a decision of that nature. I have not used that power, and I do not anticipate using that power. The board's doing an excellent job of working together and following the training that was provided. I think they're obviously a very bright group of people who are incredibly devoted to this task and to our need to get our accreditation situation concretely established and recover the ability to serve the students in San Francisco the way we need to.
And that was another area that I wanted to highlight where I feel we've made some tremendous improvement.
This is George Koster from KCSF's Voices of the Community. You've been listening to an interview with Kristin Charles and Guy Lease from the Chancellor's Office of City College of San Francisco regarding the accreditation process. We'll be right back after these public service announcements. Did you know you can listen to KCSF 90.9 live right on your smartphone? KCSF is now available to listen to on the go with TuneIn Radio. Go to tunein.com and download the app to your phone, or just listen through your browser. This is tunein.com to start listening live to KCSF 90.9, your community, your radio. Welcome back to KCSF's Voices of the Community. This is George Koster, and today we are discussing City College of San Francisco's accreditation crisis. Let's go back to our interview with Kristin Charles and Guy Lease from the Chancellor's Office.
Obviously, you're still going through the process, and you have, with the injunction, I know the Dennis Herrera piece also gave some more headroom there as well. What are the major issues still facing the school to get to a point where you've completed the accreditation process?
Well, there are a number. One of the concerns that came out of our last site visit and our own self-evaluation in fall 2014 was the extent to which we provided equitable services to students across all sites. So we've been working on that front. We developed a task force to really look at data at each site and to think about the needs in terms of the core services for students that we offer. And we have a draft plan that we are planning to implement by January 1st. So that will be final within the next month or so. The other area of concern is our fiscal stability. We've talked about that. Guy touched on this, enrollment management is a key piece of all of that, and ensuring that we are aligning our course offerings with the number of students that we serve. Our expenses are increasing, our numbers are decreasing, so we have to find some balance. But again, I feel that we have an 8-year financial plan, and we're sticking to that. We're ensuring that we have adequate reserves. We are thinking about our long-term liabilities as well, and that's all vital. Another area of concern that came out of the 2014 self-evaluation and site visit was really around our decision-making and allowing for effective participation. We've been working on developing flowcharts, something as simple as that, right? Which isn't quite so simple as it turns out, but to really identify, let's just take a policy. How does a policy come into being at the college? Who has authority over a particular policy? It depends on whether or not there is student concerns related to it, or whether or not it is related to what we call academic and professional matters, in which the academic senate would have a say. But we've developed flowcharts to address those kinds of decisions so that we can really, I think that it was not always very transparent. How do decisions get made here? Who is responsible? And it also tended to be pretty clunky, right? So we're really trying to streamline decision making and to make it more transparent so that people can effectively participate when that's called for, so that we can get to a decision more quickly. Another area with respect to the integration of plans, we have a lot of plans, a lot of state mandated plans around equity, around student support, around adult basic education. We have an education master plan as well. We need to make sure that all of those plans speak to each other. And I would say that they do, and we've actually had very good success in terms of the plans themselves really coordinating, but the implementation of those plans is where it gets tricky. And again, a lot of that goes back to decision making, and it goes back to how we allocate resources, because those state mandated plans have money associated with them as well. And so there still needs to be some individual decision making, but there needs to be some way to centralize the results of those decisions so we can coordinate and make sure that we cover the areas of needs as best we can. And I would say administrative stability has been another area of concern. Really, since 2012, it's been particularly acute. We've had a lot of turnover. We've had a turnover in chancellors. We had 2 interim chancellors, followed by a permanent chancellor, and then followed again by an interim chancellor. But our current interim chancellor has a 2-year appointment, and that's a very good thing. That really helps us get our feet underneath us, particularly as we are racing toward the deadline of next fall for our site visit, and then the January 2017 determination.
Is the part of the, if you will, kind of rebirth of CCSF also include renegotiation with everyone who works there, whether you're a faculty member or someone who's working in administration? Is that all part of the rework, the rebudgeting, if you will?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I wouldn't say it's something that has to happen regularly anyway. Contracts need to be renewed, and in that process there are negotiations, and it just so happens that we are in the process of negotiations both with faculty and with the classified staff. So yes, certainly keeping in mind our current realities, that has to be a big part of those discussions. And Guy, I don't know if you'd have more to say.
Well, it's one of the challenges, clearly. I mean, people live in a very expensive area here, and they need a living wage. And the difficulty for us is trying to balance how much money we have available with the needs of our employees. We're certainly hopeful that in our coming negotiations we'll be able to reach agreement on some moderate kinds of increases for people. Keeping in mind our employees have not had a raise since 2007-8. So it's been, like 8 years since they've had an increase. And in fact, during that period of time, they actually took a decrease of sorts. The classified staff took a decrease in staffing. The faculty took a decrease in pay. Some of that has been restored. We hope to restore all of that as part of these negotiations. But the faculty has been, I think, amazingly supportive during very difficult, challenging times for this college. And they look to the future, as do we, to see that begin to improve.
I know there's a lot of part-time faculty versus full-time. Is there a difference between the two with regards to how you address the budget crisis?
One of the interesting parts about this college, which is rather unique around the state, is the college committed years ago to trying to pay our non-credit teachers an equivalent salary to our credit. The reason it's unique is because for years the funding for non-credit was only about 60% of what it was for credit. It was hard to come up with the money to meet that commitment. The other unique sort of aspect of our pay over the years has been the commitment by the full-time faculty to our part-time faculty, and that is to keep them at a rate of pay that's higher than most colleges pay for part-time faculty. Here we're in a situation where our part-time faculty are actually the highest paid part-timers in the Bay 10 area, the Bay 10 being or the total of 10 community college districts within the Bay Area. And that's what we use for comparison purposes for salary. Our faculty, on the other hand, are in 9th place out of 10, our full-time faculty. So it's really important for us to try to take care of the full-time faculty, we believe. So in negotiations we're trying to address that, and the faculty is trying to sort of maintain their commitment to the part-timers. we have a different approach, but then that's what negotiations are all about. I can't tell you how it's going to end up, but we are trying to address the differences there and the needs as best we can.
I wanted to turn for a moment back to the accreditation issue, and the most recent news being the Naseki study and the governors, and then so what you have is the ACCJC being organization that you're answering to now going through their own accreditation crisis. How do you think that would impact CCSF's accreditation? I mean, there's some discussion that they conceivably would not be the organization that you have to go through the accreditation with because they themselves are discredited.
Right.
That conceivably CCSF might have to go through another accreditation crisis? Is that?
Well, at this moment, we really don't know. What we know is that we have to continue on this process, on the restoration process, and we have to fully meet the standards, and there's really no escaping that, right? I think the potential change in accreditors, for example, that would not happen tomorrow. It probably wouldn't happen before we're through this process anyway. And it's really too soon, I think, unless Guy has other information than I have, to really know ultimately what will happen to us specifically as a result, let alone the big picture of accreditation, other than there will be accreditation because that is required, of course. I mean, it's a voluntary process, but it's required for us to be able to receive, for our students to be able to receive financial aid. So
Right.
in our minds, that's not voluntary, right?
Right.
We need to be able to offer that to our students.
Along with the state funding as well, right?
Oh,
Without
and the state
accreditation.
funding, thank you, yes,
Yep.
right. I mean, certainly there are other models, but
Yeah.
can't see that working so well. I don't know if you have
No,
any
I don't
other
have any
information.
insight on what the outcome's going to be, but I think as Kristin has said, our commitment is to meet the standards as they are written and to be able to be fully reaffirmed in January of 2017 by ACJC. And I think under any of the circumstances that I've seen, ACJC will still be our accrediting commission at that period of time.
One question that I've searched for, and perhaps both of you could help me or even direct me, but what would be the economic impact on the economy in San Francisco? Because I think one of the most important things that CCSF provides is, like, let's take the culinary program, for example, or even the non-credited English as a second language. You're helping tens of thousands of people provide workers into the San Francisco economy, and if all of a sudden that went away, has anyone thought about what that economic impact would be?
We try not to think about
Right.
that too much. You know, I've been involved in economic impact studies before of what kind of impact does it simply have in a community to have a college there. And they tell me that you can estimate every dollar that's spent multiplies itself as it goes through the different community. You know, we pay a faculty member, the faculty member buys groceries, pays rent. The renters then have, you know, somebody in their building, and you keep that up all the way through all of the expenses we have, and they say you multiply it 3-4 times. So our budget is $200 million. You know, you could estimate just on financial impact getting close to $1 billion a year impact on the city and county of San Francisco. That's devastating enough. But then you'd have something like 2,500 people who would be unemployed, that would be looking for jobs, possibly moving out of the area to work because they wouldn't be able to find work like that. Mm-hmm. You'd have students who would have to find other means if they could possibly find it, but I think in many cases people would probably give up those aspirations and sort of remain in the jobs they're in, which would, in the long run, have a devastating impact on the workforce and the potential for people to be able to fulfill the jobs going to become available in the future. You know, as we know, there's so many jobs today that we didn't even dream about 10 or 15 years ago. So trying to prepare students for jobs we don't know about has been one of our challenges for a long time. But it's teaching people how to learn and teaching people how to use, you know, technology and to find answers out for themselves and, you know, progress has been the challenge. That would stop. The last time that the Accrediting Commission and the state got together and literally closed down a college in Southern California at Compton College, and that college was then taken over by a neighboring district. I guess that's a possibility here. Taking over a small district like Compton that had maybe 5,000 or 6,000 students compared to taking over one that has 70,000 students is dramatically different. I don't think any of our neighboring districts have an interest in trying to do that. So I'm not sure the capacity to do it. I'm not sure that it'd be possible. We've said over and over here today, our effort is to meet the standards. We believe we will. We believe we'll get through accreditation through the restoration process and we'll be fine. But there's a lot of work to do. And this is a very large institution. Anytime you have that large of an institution with so many people who are so highly educated and thoughtful and reasoned, they have different thoughts and different reasons for doing what they do. So trying to make changes so that we can meet all these standards is time consuming. It's challenging the intellectual capacity to do it. Our faculty and staff work very, very hard on all of these challenges, and we've made remarkable progress.
We really have.
Just this second, another kid dropped into school. If we do nothing, 3.5 million kids will receive a diploma over the next 4 years. United Way knows that kids who have a caring adult in their life are more likely to make it. And the difference between a dropout and a graduate could be you. Take the pledge to volunteer now at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Red Council.
Did you know that 1 in 6 Americans struggle with hunger? There are friends. There are coworkers. Their kids go to school with our kids. Sometimes we're not even aware that they're struggling. This problem is closer than you think. But so is the solution. Visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Together, we're Feeding America. A public service announcement brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the second half of KCSF's Voices of the Community. This is George Coster, and today we are discussing City College of San Francisco's accreditation crisis. In today's show, we are speaking with Kristin Charles, the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Development, Accreditation, and the Liaison Officer at City College of San Francisco, and Special Trustee Guy Lease for City College of San Francisco, as well as Karen Saginor, Department Chair of Library and Learning Resources at City College of San Francisco. The next perspective on the accreditation process is from Karen Saginor with an overview of the accreditation process and ecosystem.
This is George Coster from KCSF's Voices of the Community radio show. I'm here today with Karen Saginor, Department Chair of Library and Learning Resources at City College of San Francisco. And we're discussing the ongoing process of City College of San Francisco going through its accreditation. Karen, welcome to Voices of the Community. I'd like to first start out with your interest in accreditation. Obviously, it's been an ongoing issue for several years here at CCSF, and just to kind of find out, why you got interested in it and engaged in it, and then get some more background.
Okay. In 2010, I was elected to be president of the Academic Senate, and the Academic Senate is the body of the faculty that deliberates on academic and professional matters, such as curriculum, grading policies, professional development issues, and so forth. So I was in that role in 2012. I was in that role in 2010 when we were preparing for the accreditation visit in 2012, and I was in that role in 2012 when City College was put on show cause, and I was still in that role in 2013 when they announced that they were going to be terminating the accreditation 1 year after that.
Can we, for the audience that doesn't know what show cause means, perhaps it might be worth just bumping up for a second to provide the listening audience just kind of an ecosystem of how accreditation works with community colleges in California. So, you've got all the various players. It might be really helpful for people to understand, who's who, and then dive into more depth.
Okay. The goal of accreditation is supposed to be peer review, where people from colleges basically look at each other, and that's true throughout, for universities, for community colleges, for schools. And the accrediting agency's role is make that happen, to help make that happen. The accrediting agency sets standards, which is a list of things that colleges must meet. And then there is a process where each college is reviewed on a regular basis every 5 years or 6 years or however long it is to see if the college is meeting those standards, the whole process is pretty technical in terms of preparing a written report and so forth. The accrediting agency really has sort of three groups. There is the commission. The commission are unpaid folks who've been either appointed or elected, depending on how it works, for a number of years, who are supposed to be the decision makers. Then the commission has a paid staff. And in the case of the ACCJC, titles of the paid staff rather than executive director, the chief person is called president, and then they have vice presidents and some other folks. And then the sort of third part of how this works is the visiting teams that go to the colleges and prepare reports for the commission. Now, in our particular case, the commission and commission staff at some point became a very closed system. Basically, the commission staff was nominating, here's who should be on the commission. It was sort of a fairly tight group, I would say. The vote on who would be on the commission, the votes are cast by the presidents and chancellors of the various colleges. But for quite some time, the presidents and chancellors didn't really have any way of nominating anyone. They just saw the nominations. I don't know if you've ever been part of like a credit union. You get something in the mail saying, here's the slate, right? A few years back, they made some changes to the process to at least make it possible for someone to be nominated by someone other than the group that the commission puts to the nominating group that the commission puts together. But as far as I know, only one person has gotten on the commission through that route. Otherwise, it's all the folks that have been on there choose other people to come on there with them.
Right, the proverbial good old person's network.
Yes, and in the case of our particular accrediting commission, the paid staff headed up by President Barbara Bino. President Barbara Bino has become notorious for having a very strong personality and for really providing the direction in which things go. ACCJC has the California community colleges, Hawaii, some of the Pacific Islands. And so the 113 California community colleges represent something like 91% of the colleges of their business.
And then since we're speaking in acronyms, ACCJC means?
ACCJC stands for Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges. And one of the unusual things about our situation is that everywhere else in the United States, the accreditation of community colleges is done by the same body that accredits four-year colleges and universities. It's special to us that we have a commission that does just two-year colleges.
In California?
As I said, in California, Hawaii, and a couple of the Pacific Islands.
Within the ecosystem of all the accreditation, who in turn does ACC answer to?
The way it should work, there's really two layers of folks who have some oversight over the commission. One layer is, as I mentioned, the commission members are elected by the CEOs of the colleges that are members of it. So that should be a layer of oversight. Now, one of the things that's happened with ACCJC is that those who are unhappy and who make it known that they're unhappy are liable to find that their college is not doing very well in the accreditation process. This has been the experience in many colleges. It makes it very difficult for members of the college community to speak up directly to ACCJC, and even it's been difficult for members of the commission. I believe there have been some members of the commission who've been pretty unhappy with the actions, particularly of that paid staff, the president, but do not feel like they have the power to do much about it. So the other layer of oversight is the Department of Education.
And that's the federal?
The Federal Department of Education. And how do they get involved in it? Well, they get involved in it because the accreditation is used as the measurement to decide whether colleges will get certain kinds of federal funds and whether the students at those colleges will get Pell Grants or other kinds of federal financial aid, student financial aid. Clearly, if they were to say, well, this accrediting body isn't doing its job, therefore we're not going to give student financial aid to any of the students who go to the colleges accredited by that body, then all the colleges will say, well, then we don't want to use that accreditor. We need to use an accreditor that is recognized by the federal government. So it's a recognition process that the federal government has. The federal government has, again, several layers. There are regulations that are put out by the Department of Education that every accrediting body needs to follow. And then there is a cycle of review where the accrediting agencies are looked at to see whether or not they are following those regulations. Again, more complexity here. The Department of Education, instead of just doing that directly, involves another body called NASICI, and I know you're going to ask me what that one stands for too. NASICI stands for the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity, NACIQI.
Are they a third-party kind of verification or certification organization that the Federal Department of Education says to NASICI, we want you to do a review on ACCJC, for example?
Yes, the U.S. Department of Education says to this group, NASICI, we want you to make a recommendation on what we should be doing in regards to, and it's always a list of different accrediting agencies that are up for review.
Okay.
Right?
So ACCJC is up for its own version of accreditation or review by the Federal Department of Education?
Well, actually, ACCJC came up for its regular review by the Federal Department of Education in 2013. And at that time, the NASICI committee recommended that ACCJC was not meeting the requirements. And the Department of Education took that recommendation, did some more work with it, and decided, yes, indeed, they are not meeting all the requirements. And so told ACCJC, you have 1 year to come into compliance with these requirements. Things stretched out. ACCJC appealed a piece of that. The whole process, the NASICI meeting took place in December of 2013, but the formal letter from the Department of Education saying now you have 1 year didn't come out till February, and NASICI only meets twice a year anyway. So at this coming December, which is now really 2 years after that, ACCJC is basically having to come back to NASICI to show does it now meet these requirements that it wasn't meeting 2 years ago.
Essentially, the reviewing body of CCSF, City College of San Francisco, ACCJC, is not meeting its own requirements. And so what was some of NASICI's findings of ACCJC not in compliant, and then how did those actually feed into the review and accreditation of a CCSF?
Okay, so there were basically sort of two areas in which ACCJC was found out of compliance with requirements. One of the areas was that ACCJC is seeking to expand its scope so that it can accredit four-year institutions and not just two-year institutions. So there were quite a few requirements related to four-year institutions where NASICI said, you're not there yet, work on these some more. There were three areas that really apply to the community college situation where ACCJC was found out of compliance. And I'm going to paraphrase them. One of the areas was in giving institutions clear information about when they are deficient and where the deficiency is. In particular, ACCJC has tended to give documents to colleges that say, you're meeting the standards, but there are these recommendations, and it's not always been clear whether these are recommendations for things you should work on and do a little better, but you're doing okay, or whether these are, you're not meeting it very well here. And that was very relevant to City College. In 2006, they came to City College and they said, you're meeting all the standards. We're giving you 6 more years. Here are some areas that you should work on. And these were areas that they were telling all colleges they should work on. And then in 2012, they said, you're not meeting the standards in those areas. And we told you in 2006 that you weren't meeting the standards in those areas. So now you've been out of compliance for 6 years. And that was why they said, instead of giving you what's called a sanction, of telling you we're giving you a warning or putting you on probation, which are the two lower sanctions, we're putting you on the sanction called show cause, as in, you've been out of compliance for a long time, you're so seriously out of compliance, you need to show cause why we shouldn't just terminate your accreditation. And that was quite a shock to folks at City College who had been here in 2006 and who'd seen the report that said, you meet all the standards. That report was full of praise in many areas. I don't want to digress too far, but one of the issues there was something that we found out a little later, was that the visiting team that had come to City College had at first said, well, City College has some issues, which we know we had issues in 2012. Probably City College should be given a warning. And then the visiting team decided, all right, we'll make the official recommendation to the commission that City College should be put on probation. It was not the visiting team that said City College is doing so badly, they should be put on show cause. That was the commission that made that decision, with advice from the president.
And the president being
Barbara Bino, yes.
Right. And she's one of the paid staff that...
She's a paid staff member.
Members of JCC's commission/board, I guess?
She's basically her position is like that of executive director. She answers to the commission. Some
of the commissioners that are unhappy with, for example, her behavior or the behavior of some of their staff, and they themselves were not heard, for example.
Yeah. Get back to then where things are with Nisiki. So one of the areas in which ACCJC was told it was out of compliance now almost 2 years ago was in not giving clear notification when a college is actually deficient as opposed to something else. Another area was in the composition of the visiting teams. The visiting teams were supposed to be visited by our peers. The federal regulations state that needs to include faculty. It does not define what the word faculty means precisely, and ACCJC has claimed that, oh yes, we're doing fine, we're putting faculty on, but the visiting teams they send out to colleges have very few faculty on them, sometimes no faculty. They have a lot of administrators on them instead.
This is George Koster from KCSF's Voices of the Community. If you're just joining us, today we are discussing City College of San Francisco's accreditation crisis, and you've been listening to an interview with Karen Saginor, Chair of Library and Learning Resources at City College of San Francisco. We'll return to our interview with Karen right after these messages. Welcome back to KCSF's Voices of the Community. This is George Koster, and today we're discussing City College of San Francisco's accreditation crisis. Let's go back to our interview with Karen Saginor, who's providing us an overview of the accreditation process and players.
There was a court case, which I'm sure you know about, last winter, and one of the interesting things that I heard at that court case was one of the paid staff members of ACCJC said that their definition of faculty is anyone who has the qualifications to serve as a faculty member, regardless of whether they have ever taught or not. Now, for the California community colleges, we teach all kinds of subjects, and the qualifications for teaching don't always require a higher degree. You can have a bachelor's degree and expertise in the field to be a fabulous teacher in, carpentry, in auto, repair. I mean, there's lots of subjects we teach where we have wonderful faculty, and their qualifications are a BA and experience in the field. But to say that someone who has a BA plus experience in the field but has never taught should count as a faculty member being actually working as a faculty member is a very important part of having the faculty perspective. That was very interesting that was the definition that they gave at that time. And at that time, the ACCJ staff member who said that claimed that the Department of Education approved of that definition. I don't think that's what the Department of Education has in mind for the definition, but again, maybe that will be clarified at the meeting in this winter.
And that's December of 2015.
Yes. Yes. The third thing, which is in some ways one of the most important, is one of the regulations. It requires that an accrediting commission be accepted, that its decisions and judgment and standards be accepted by educational institutions and basically others in the field. And I'm not, quoting it precisely, but basically that's the idea. And that's one of the areas in which ACCJC was deficient in 2013 and is in worse shape now than it was then. Since 2013, the independent auditor of the state of California, a completely nonpartisan position, put out an audit report about ACCJC and found that its practices were very deficient in many ways. Very recently, a task force from the California Community College's state chancellor's office put out a report explaining here's what we need an accreditor to do. ACCJC is not doing these things. We recommend that the California community colleges find a different accreditor.
And that was the report that was just recently published?
Yes,
right.
That report was recently published and came to yet another body, the Board of Governors, right? The California community colleges, the system has a state chancellor and also a statewide Board of Governors. And the statewide Board of Governors was given this report as an information item, but decided that they weren't going to just say, well, thank you very much for the information, which is what they usually do with information items. Instead, they passed a motion, they work under Robert's rules, directing the chancellor to send that report to the Department of Education and to point out to the Department of Education that the task force that had written the report had been unanimous in endorsing it, and make sure that they understood that it was the Board of Governors that was telling the state chancellor that the Department of Education needed to look at this report.
So the action items then would be ACCJC is now up for review, has almost, it appears to be a vote of no confidence by the Board of Governors, who in a sense oversees community colleges, and these are the community colleges such as CCSF that are being reviewed and accredited by this body, ACCJC. In your mind, what are the next steps going forward in the ACCJC piece? And then let's double back to how that in turn impacts the accreditation process, which has been dragging on for, 3 years now? And obviously, having a massive impact on the school itself, which we'll get to.
The next step, actually, and this is typical of the way this works at the federal level, information goes to the Department of Education staff, right? The NACICI Commission doesn't sort through all the documents themselves raw. The Department of Education staff sorts through all the documents they get. So they got this from the Board of Governors, they've gotten third-party comment from lots of individuals, they've gotten information from the ACCJC folks, and they'll assemble this material, organize it, and will make a recommendation themselves to NACICI. So that NACICI starts with a recommendation from the Department of Education staff. Of course, ACCJC will be given an opportunity to provide its side of the story for this also. The NACICI body will meet in December. They will have reviewed the written information. They will receive oral comment. There will be an oral presentation at that meeting in Washington, D.C. Then they will discuss it, and they will vote on what recommendation they want to make to the Secretary of Education. Again, there's, more stuff happens. The Secretary of Education will review all that and make a decision early next spring. I don't know what the possibilities are. In general, what I've heard is that NACICI and the Department of Education, they don't have a lot of finesse in their kind of oversight. It's a recognition hearing. They can say you're not meeting the requirements, but if they decide ACCJC is still not meeting the requirements, I don't know what options they have besides saying, and we're withdrawing recognition. Right? Will they put ACCJC out of business? In the way that it's written, that seems to be what they would do. They gave ACCJC a year to come into compliance. If they decide that ACCJC is not in compliance, then they would be withdrawing recognition. I have the feeling that it may not go exactly that way because life is more complicated than the way the rules are laid out.
So then in December, some kind of recommendation from a third party, Nisiki, to the Department of Education, and at that point there'll be a decision as to whether or not there's no confidence in ACCJC. Let's assume for a moment there is no confidence. Would that mean that then in turn ACCJC would no longer be the accreditation body for CCSF?
I believe that if the Department of Education withdraws recognition from an accrediting agency, the colleges that have been using that accrediting agency have some period of time. I don't remember whether it's 1 year or 2 years, but they have some period of time to go find themselves another accreditor.
Okay.
So it's not the case that all the students at all those colleges will lose federal funding immediately.
And that's where I was headed, and with regards to
how will that affect City College?
Right.
Again, it's hard to say in that, generally speaking, when a college is moving from one accreditor to another, it's because they've decided they want to change accreditors. And the general process is that a college can move from one accreditor to another when it's in good standing with the accreditor that it's leaving, right? And this is to prevent a college from going out shopping around. We're talking now about a regional accreditor, but there are all kinds of other schools out there that may use what are called national accreditors, where there's more competition, where they could say, oh, well, I would rather go with this one rather than that one. To stop colleges from basically shopping for, well, you're not going to make as many demands on me as that other accreditor does. That's the usual situation. In this case, I'm sure that the Department of Education would be, looking at the situation. City College is not by any means the only college that has a sanction from ACCJC at this point.
Do you know how many there are?
I don't know the exact number right now. Among other things, ACCJC has tended to sanction a college. They come back and then they say, okay, you're okay, but you need to go with a follow-up report. And then in the follow-up report, sometimes they sanction the college again. And besides, we have this situation where ACCJC issues this murky language about you are meeting all the standards, maybe you're not meeting all the standards. So I think that also gives some colleges a little bit of confusion about what their exact accreditation status.
Right. I was reading about Compton Community College, for example, as a very sad example.
A very sad example
of where what the end game is.
This is George Koster from KCSF's Voices of the Community. You've been listening to an interview with Karen Saginor, Department Chair of Library and Learning Resources at City College of San Francisco, about the accreditation crisis. Today's show is part one of our four-part series focused on the accreditation of City College of San Francisco. We thank City College staff, Karen Saginor, Department Chair of Library and Learning Resources, Kristin, the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor of Institutional Development, Accreditation, and Liaison, Special Trustee of Lease, Saginor and Sons, and for each working to find advocacy solutions to address the accreditation process and facing City College of San Francisco, one of the community's economic leaders of assistance. The show is linked to the internet and interviews the best practice research featured on today's show will be posted on the next day on my website, georgecoster.com. Please email me at george@georgecoster.com if you'd like more information or ideas for getting featured in the show. And follow me on Twitter at georgecoster. Thank you again for listening to KCSF's Voices of the Community, and please tune in to our next show, March 16th at 2 p.m., which will be part two of our four-part series focused on City College of San Francisco's accreditation process and the impact it's having on the students, the faculty, the college, and our community. Part two will feature interviews with Richard Baum, Professor of Social Science at City College of San Francisco, and Raphael Mandelman, the President of the Trustees for City College of San Francisco.